Welcome to True Terror Tales, where the shadows hold secrets, and every story pulls you deeper into the unknown. Here, we explore the chilling, the spine-tingling, and the stories that make you question the safety of the dark. Whether it's ghostly legends, unsolved mysteries, or creatures lurking in the night, you've found your home for horror. Dim the lights, settle in, and prepare to be haunted by tales that will linger long after the video ends. Let's dive into the terror together. My name is Kanfo, and I was a woodcutter by profession. Cutting and selling wood was my sole livelihood, and I lived a life of relentless toil. During the day, I sold wood in the market, and at night, I ventured into the forests of Arizona to chop logs. Sleep was a luxury I could afford only 3 nights a week. My days were consumed by work, leaving little room for friends or family, and the weight of financial struggles often suffocated me. One night, as usual, I went into the forest to cut wood. However, that night was different. I was exhausted and decided to rest. I sat under a tree and, without realizing it, drifted off to sleep. When I woke up, darkness had consumed the forest. The lamp I carried was my only source of light, and as I reached for my axe, I found it missing. I clearly remembered placing it beside me before falling asleep. Strangely, all my other belongings, including the money in my pocket, were untouched. Perplexed and uneasy, I decided to head back home. As I made my way through the woods, I suddenly heard a woman's voice. It was faint yet persistent, calling my name. I turned around, and in the dim light, I saw a dark figure. A woman stood there, partially obscured by the shadows. Her voice was soft, almost trembling, as though she was scared of something. I asked her who she was, but she didn't answer. Instead, she kept repeating my name and motioning for me to come closer. Gathering courage, I stepped forward, but each time I moved closer, she seemed to stay the same distance away. It was as if the forest itself was conspiring against me, leading me in circles. Suddenly, I tripped over something, my axe. It was lying exactly where I had been sleeping earlier. My confusion turned to dread as I picked it up and looked back toward the woman. But she had vanished. I hurried to leave, but her voice continued to echo around me. It was no longer coming from one direction, it surrounded me, growing louder and more frantic. The forest felt alive, the trees seeming to shift and block my path. I couldn't find my way out. Hours passed as I wandered aimlessly. Her voice turned into cries and screams, reverberating through the woods. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. The silence was deafening. By morning, I was found near the forest's edge by some villagers who had come searching for me. Strangely, they found me lying under a small tree, not the large one I remembered resting beneath. They assumed I had been drunk and lost my way, but I knew the truth. The experience haunted me for years, and I never returned to that part of the forest alone. To this day, I cannot explain what happened that night. This was the first story. Stay tuned as I tell you another mysterious tale that took place in the Australian woods, this time from the perspective of a man named Raymond. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future stories. Now let's move to the second story, which is about a man named Raymond. Raymond was a nature enthusiast who loved to explore forests and mountains in his free time. He worked as a school teacher in Australia and spent his weekends hiking and camping. His adventurous spirit often led him to unexplored areas, where he enjoyed the tranquility of nature and studied the local flora and fauna. One weekend, Raymond decided to visit a remote forest he had never been to before. He had heard about it from a fellow hiker who described it as untouched and breathtaking. Excited about the trip, Raymond packed his essentials, including food, a tent, and his camera, and set out early in the morning. After a long drive and a short hike, Raymond found himself surrounded by dense trees and the serene sounds of nature. The forest was everything he had imagined, beautiful and peaceful, with no sign of human activity. He chose a spot near a small stream to set up his tent and spent the day exploring the area, taking photographs of birds and unusual plants. As evening approached, Raymond returned to his campsite, lit a small fire, and began preparing his dinner. The forest grew quieter with the setting sun, and the atmosphere became eerie. He shrugged off his uneasiness, telling himself it was just the unfamiliarity of the place. After dinner, he lay in his tent, reading a book by flashlight, and soon drifted off to sleep. In the middle of the night, Raymond was jolted awake by a strange noise outside his tent. It sounded like someone, or something, was walking around. He froze, holding his breath to listen. The sound grew louder, as if the footsteps were circling his tent. Gathering his courage, Raymond unzipped the tent and peeked outside. But he saw nothing. He stepped out cautiously, his flashlight in hand, and scanned the area. The forest was deathly silent, except for the rustling of leaves in the wind. Convinced it must have been an animal, he returned to his tent, but sleep eluded him. He lay awake, listening intently for any further sounds. Hours passed, and just as he began to relax, he heard a soft whisper. It sounded like someone calling his name, Raymond. The voice was faint but clear. Startled, he sat up and looked around. The whisper came again, this time from a different direction. His heart raced as he tried to locate the source of the voice, but there was no one in sight. Raymond decided to pack his things and leave immediately. As he stepped out of his tent, he noticed a faint glow in the distance, like the flicker of a lantern. Hoping it was another camper, he called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" The glow didn't move or respond. Against his better judgment, Raymond decided to approach it, thinking it might lead him to safety. As he walked toward the light, it seemed to retreat further into the forest. He followed it for what felt like hours, unaware of how far he had strayed from his campsite. Finally, the light vanished, leaving him in complete darkness. Lost and terrified, Raymond realized he had been lured deeper into the woods. He tried retracing his steps but found no familiar landmarks. As he wandered aimlessly, he felt an oppressive presence, as if someone, or something, was watching him. The air grew colder, and the forest seemed to close in around him. Suddenly, he heard the whisper again, louder this time and right behind him. He spun around, shining his flashlight, and came face to face with a shadowy figure. The figure had no discernible features, just a dark, human-like silhouette. It stood still, staring at him, or so it seemed, paralyzed with fear. Raymond could neither scream nor move. The figure raised an arm and pointed deeper into the forest. Raymond didn't wait to see what it wanted. He turned and ran as fast as he could in the opposite direction. Branches scratched his face and arms as he sprinted through the undergrowth, his flashlight barely illuminating the path. After what felt like an eternity, he stumbled upon a dirt road and collapsed in exhaustion. By some miracle, a passing car found him and took him to the nearest town. When Raymond recounted his experience, most people dismissed it as a hallucination caused by fatigue or fear. However, the locals had their own theories. They warned him that the forest was cursed, known for strange disappearances and unexplainable phenomena. Raymond never returned to the forest and gave up solo hiking altogether. To this day, he remains haunted by the memory of the shadowy figure and the eerie whispers calling his name. This concludes the second story. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to subscribe to True Terror Tales and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more mysterious and spine-chilling stories. See you in the next episode.